All right, well, good afternoon, or I guess almost good afternoon. My name is Nick Skytland. You can find me online at about.me/Skytland if you want more information. And today, you're going to have to hold on because I go quick. And I'm going to give you a lot of information. Hopefully this will be kind of exciting. But I want to start off by talking about how I got to NASA. How I ended up here from a small town of less than 150 people in Edmond, North Dakota. And it all really started in 1986 when there was the Challenger accident. And we were watching it on TV. And this is one of those formative events in my life that actually shaped who I became today and my education and the passions that I had. And so as I went through school, I wanted to work for NASA. I wasn't sure how to do it. I ended up finding this maybe not that well designed website, but it had all the information I needed. It was the JSC Co-op Education website, and this is what it looked like when I first came across it. And through the co-op program, which I came in at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, I had an opportunity to start training astronauts. I got to work at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory and actually get my hands dirty building hardware. I got to actually see firsthand and experience the amazing shuttle launches. I went to a number of them on road trips from Texas to Florida, all-nighters with friends and pizza. It was crazy. I got to actually build mission-relevant hardware for the International Space Station. I mean, it really was a dream come true, and all the things that I thought NASA was essentially unfolding before my eyes. Here's this really interesting, sexy agency doing cutting-edge space exploration work, and I was a part of it. This little kid from North Dakota who doesn't have a NASA center anywhere around me. So when I got my offer letter from NASA, I couldn't even wait for the NASA movers to show up. I got my own U-Haul, I packed up all my stuff, and I drove like 2,000 miles so I could start the day that everybody came back to work, which was January 6th. And that was actually right before the next space shuttle accident. And so I actually spent the first parts of my career at NASA in East Texas, picking up pieces of the space shuttle. But the formative event at NASA early on in my childhood actually really shaped who it was I became today. And so our objective today is to try to understand how to build bridges with the next generation. Who is the next generation? What are we even talking about? And so we're going to define that a little bit, and I'm going to give you 7 tips essentially to effectively communicate with the next generation. Take them for what they are. There's a lot of tips out there. There's consultants, there's advisors, there's social media experts. These are just 7. I was going through things, I was like, what is it that I want to share with this audience? Because I have to tell you, I'm absolutely passionate about NASA, and I'm really concerned about our workforce. Because I see a lot of the people who came in around my time leave. They're leaving for other places like Google and Facebook, and essentially the NASAs of today, which is Silicon Valley. So let's go, let's get started. So number 7, I'm going to count down, kind of like a launch. Know your audience. So I'm really interested in the study of generations, and this gets me in a lot of trouble because this can completely be taken out of context and misinterpreted. So I'm going to do my best here just to kind of stay on target. But there are 2 guys, Neil Howe and William Strauss, who are historians. And if you haven't read their book that was published in 1991 called Generations, The Histories of America's Future, 1584 to 2069, I encourage you to do so. Because what they have developed is a really interesting framework to understand the generations. And I think it can teach us a lot about the next generation by understanding where we came from. And I can't remember how many generations there have been since America was founded, essentially. But this theory has actually held up for every generation except for one. And essentially, the baby boomer generation, the way they describe the baby boomer generation is as a prophet. And they were born during kind of a high time in our country. It was about a time of rejuvenated community life and consensus around a new societal order. And so prophets, if you understand their life cycle, they kind of grew up as indulged children of a post-crisis era. They came of age as self-absorbed young crusaders of an awakening and focused morals and principles in midlife, and then emerging, as you can see now, as elders on another crisis. Because right now we're in another crisis. And it's interesting how this essentially archetype holds up over time. And baby boomers, I think, are really well known for their values-orientated leadership. They're known as leaders. They're known as being able to have a vision and follow it and create organizations that have lasting impact. Gen X came after that. And so Gen X was actually born during a time that was called the Awakening. And they were known as nomads, meaning that essentially, as young adults, they were passionate about attacking the established institutional order. And it's just because of how they grew up in response to the baby boomer generation. Due to their location in history, the generations kind of known as nomads essentially are remembered for their fast-paced, alienated, rising adult years and their midlife years of pragmatic leadership. And their societal contributions end up being about survival and honor and just pragmatic leadership. They're really, really good leaders. Gen Y, which we talk a lot about today, and it makes sense because that's where a lot of the marketing dollars go. So that's where a lot of our focus ends up. This is a generation that was kind of born during an unraveling. They're known as the hero generation because they grow up as kind of these overprotected kids, very team-orientated, energetic, maybe overly confident, and they essentially grow into a generation that has, over time in the past, has had huge political achievements as elders. And so it's an interesting model if you look at that. And so you can use this model and you can say, hey, well what's next? I mean, what does the next generation look like? Actually, I'll go back one, forward one. The way generations kind of break down is that they come about every 20 years. And so you can kind of predict what's going to happen. And William Strauss and Neil Howell essentially talked about 80-year spans. So it's kind of cyclical in 4 generations. So the next generation, which is some say started around the turn of the century in 2000, are really what we know as true digital natives. And I've read a lot of literature, and I have to admit, there is not a lot documented about true digital natives. What we document, what we talk about is Generation Y. And so it's interesting because when we think about our education programs, we're talking about true digital natives. People who have spent their entire lives surrounded by digital media. They use digital media in new ways. Their world, technology to them is almost invisible. So they don't really see it, they just use it. And they start to create things with it in a different way. And there's a lot of benefit to this because as they grow up, they're actually going to be the first generation that's going to see a turn of this 4-generation cycle. And if you kind of look at where America is today, we're kind of at a point where we're kind of looking back at the past maybe 60 years, and we're kind of seeing things as a period of drift when our public concerns are growing, our debt is climbing, we're kind of reaching a level of urgency, and there's a new crisis on the horizon. And that's kind of where the baby boomer generation came out of. So it's really interesting to look at. But what's really important, what I want to point out, is that the true digital natives are here. They're in your internship programs. I like to actually define this as 1996, kind of when the internet was invented. That's when the first ones kind of came through. That means those kids today are 16 years old. In a few years, they're going to be in the workforce. And right now, we often talk about how there's 4 generations in the workforce. In a few years, there may be 5, depending on when people retire. And so they're going to have a large impact on our education programs, and they're different than we are in many ways. Like I said, they can use tools to create technology in new ways. They innovate and they communicate in fundamentally different ways. And they can be extremely productive and supportive if engaged. So that gives me to the 6th tip, which is essentially listen. Once we understand who the audience is, we have to kind of think about how to communicate with them. What are the channels of communication? And there's a great thing called the conversation prism that kind of outlines all the different ways social networking can be used to communicate with people online. I really encourage you to check it out. It's called the conversation prism. And the way it works is like this. I'm going to give you a case study. My son, Asher, turned 1-year-old 3 days ago. I'm really excited. He's totally cute. This is what happened. My wife texts me, hey, guess what? We're going to be parents. Oh, that's pretty cool. My dad calls me. I don't have a phone. I kind of use Google Voice. And he leaves me this transcribed message that says, great news, congratulations. I look forward to meeting our new grandson. Give me a call. My wife quickly goes onto Pinterest and starts putting together a collage of nursery ideas. It's essentially like an online scrapbook, which a lot of people are using today. We go to the hospital for a check-in, and we, of course, check in on Foursquare to make sure that people know we're at the hospital. And then I blog about it. On our blog, 10 days later after the birth, we're still alive. I've learned how to change diapers. It's pretty exciting. My friends give me advice. Yep, that's normal too. You're gonna live, you're gonna make it through 3 months, it's okay. Being a new parent's kind of a crazy experience. We post pictures on Instagram pretty much every day, multiple times a day. Facebook, all the time. I'm out of town, my wife posts a picture, my kid starts walking. But I get to experience it because I see the video. Flickr, there's photos of my kid all over the place. Asher's first birthday, which we just celebrated, we made a really cool montage online for him, just kind of showing a lot of the photos from the last year. And SlideShare, if I need some advice, here's a good presentation on parenting in the digital age, which is something I think a lot about. And the point of this is that there's a lot of ways to communicate. And those are all that's just a digital footprint of myself online over the past year. And there's a lot more of me all over the place. But that's a way I communicate with my family, my friends, the people around me. And it's really hard to communicate if you're not part of the conversation, if you don't understand the tools that people are using to communicate. So I encourage you to challenge assumptions. In government, often we have this kind of policy that no comment goes online without our explicit approval. I hear it all the time. That's not how it works in the digital age. We have to rethink the way we share information. We have to make it shareable. Here's an example of our blog page at NASA. It's blogs on nasa.gov. It's not very good. The problem here is that you don't know what content is new, you don't know what's interesting. It's text, which is not very interesting. So our open government team has a blog. This is what it looks like. It's very visual. We don't have a black background. We make it very easy to focus on the content that's interesting. And there's a lot of user design that goes into this, but there's also just kind of a lot of common sense. I mean, we don't need to over-clutter the way we do things. We need to make our content and our message chunkable. Here's an example of a social media policy that NASA put out about 3 years ago. I can't get through the whole thing. Maybe it's because I have too short of attention span, but I know it says good things because I helped kind of write part of it. But man, it's boring. Here is a great example of how we could communicate this very same thing that a local government in Australia did. I'm going to show you part of the video, and you guys can watch the rest of it online. We have it posted on open.nasa.gov. To give you an idea. It's a teaser. You're going to have to go online to watch the rest of it. It's awesome. But it's a good point of how we can take the same information, communicate it in a much more engaging way. We need to think about new ways to make our communication, our messages viral. I don't know if you happen to see this video that went around about 2 weeks ago. It's amazing. It's imagery, video imagery taken on orbit from the last International Space Station crew. And someone sped it up and put some cool music to it. It went viral. Millions of people saw this online. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to do it, just not right now. And so, I really focus on this whole idea of making things simple. Sometimes we just overcomplicate things when what we really need to do is focus on the content, focus on the message, and use platforms that are out there already. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on some of this stuff. So embrace technologies. Oftentimes, we as government tend to use a pull mentality. And I think academia does it too. I know my universities that I've been to have done this. We build destination websites with the belief that people are going to find them and then stay there as if they're interested. Stop trying to do that. It doesn't make any sense, especially in the digital age. Your community already exists. You need to go to them with your message. You need to be a hub, not a destination. For example, Apple. The App Store has over 1 billion downloads. Why does NASA create its own App Store? It doesn't make any sense when there's already a community out there. We can spend more of our time managing our community. Number 3, with your message, if you have a message, once you understand it, once you understand how you want to communicate it and where you want to communicate it, be interesting. When you communicate, be interesting, be unique. Acronyms are not interesting. I don't care what industry you are in, they're not interesting. What is interesting is space exploration. It really is interesting. It's something when I talk at schools, kids are fundamentally excited about. Why do we make it boring? Another example, why do we give boring presentations? Stop using bullet points. They're not interesting. It makes your message boring. We took that same presentation and made a very interesting infographic with it. It doesn't take a lot of creativity to do it. Influence is borrowed. It's something that I think we oftentimes focus too much on. We're trying to influence our audience. Stop doing that. NASA's really interesting. We're inspirational. And inspiration is something that's earned, and it's earned by essentially sharing a compelling story. There's people who are already doing interesting things. We just need to tell that story. One of the websites that we set up a few months ago is called women.nasa.gov, and we really focused on sharing the stories of 32 women from around the agency, kind of in a new way. It's a very simple website. There's not a lot of content and clutter on it. The videos are also very simple. It's a good way to share the message. I'm really big on this. Create opportunities to participate. I think oftentimes we focus maybe a little bit too much on what we think people are going to think of us and what people are going to perceive of us. But we need to just stop doing that and essentially start doing things. Our strategic plan should just be the things that we're already doing. We are NASA. We are exploring space. You can't get any more exciting than that. So people want to participate in that. What we need to do is create opportunities for them to do that locally. You don't need to live in Houston, Texas, Washington, D.C., Florida, California to participate in space exploration. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. NASA did actually a really great campaign with Koala. It's kind of like Foursquare. It's a location-based check-in application. And we had this thing where people could go to different NASA centers, or NASA-funded type places. And there's places like this in all 50 states. And you can uncover moon rock. So anywhere there was a moon rock, if you went there and you checked in, you got a little badge. It's a really simple way to engage our audience in space exploration. And really remember that the solution you create is only as strong as the problem you've defined. If you don't believe in your students when you're teaching, they're going to underperform. My wife's a teacher. It's very clear. She sets very high expectations on purpose. Let's do the same thing of all the people we're trying to get interested in NASA, engage in NASA. There are a lot of rocket scientists around the world that don't work for NASA, that would love to work for NASA. There are a lot of citizens who in their garage can build spacesuits and gloves, maybe better than we can do it. We need to figure out how to engage them, but we're not going to engage them if we don't give them something compelling to do. And so the last thing I want to share is think 10 years ahead. At the very beginning of the presentation, we talked about how the first wave of the true digital native is 16 years old today. What does their world look like in college, which is right around the corner? I feel so bad for those parents because it's going to be so expensive. But it's right around the corner. And then they're going to be in our workforce. We're going to be hiring them as interns very soon. Are we going to put them in a cubicle and give them a stack of paper to read? That doesn't even translate into their world right now. They don't do things like that. So what will the world be like in 10 years? I love this picture. I mean, it's just an example. I mean, we have so many ways to vision the future, but sometimes we kind of leave it at that. Think about your resume. This is what resumes looked like yesterday. Today, online, there's a lot of new visualization tools to take your resume and make it really interesting. This is my resume. What will that look like tomorrow? How can you apply this example to everything you do? What did it look like yesterday? What could it look like today with the platforms that are out there? Don't stop there. Don't make a Twitter strategy. It's too late for that. Go on to the next thing. What's next? Some bonus material, some final thoughts. The world is changing fast. You can't afford not to. Because if you don't change, people will just ignore you. There's so many options out there that people can ignore your message. It's easier than ever. So if you don't change and update your strategies, the world's going to ignore you. Experiment. It's okay to take risks. Blow things up. Not literally necessarily, but try things. Make things campaigns instead of 5-year projects that require a whole budget to do. It doesn't make any sense. Be flexible. Blow things up, like I said. Break the rules. A lot of our organizations today are based on outdated methods of management that were essentially made a lot of sense when we were doing things 50 years ago, but don't make much sense today. We've moved past the industrial age. We're living in the information age. What does that mean for your organization? There's a lot of rules that need to be broken, and I really challenge you to really think about the rules in your organization. And I'll leave you with this. Be a government in beta, be an academic institution in beta, be an organization in beta. Essentially, put the beta tag on things, essentially manage your expectations so people know that you're experimenting. And what you're going to find is a lot more people are attracted to you. Because that's what people want to do. They want to experiment, they want to break things, they want to try new things out. Be NASA. When I think of all of this, I think of NASA. This is the NASA that I came to work for when I was a co-op student. I wanted to be inspired, I wanted to break things, I wanted to work with astronauts, I wanted to find space. That's what we're doing. Let's just tell that story. So with that, I maybe have time for one question or two questions. I know it was kind of quick, and I apologize for that, but I really encourage you guys to check out open.nasa.gov for more information, and I'd be happy to follow up with you guys online as well. So is there any questions? You got one over here.
Hi, my name is Christine Grant. I'm a professor at NC State in chemical engineering, and I'm talking later today, and I'm using bullet points, so I apologize.
It's okay.
But I thought that was a great presentation, and I think that there's one group in there that is that needs to be reached, and that's the parents. I'm a parent of a 16-year-old, and you just defined my world. And conversations I have with girlfriends about who are all professionals, have gone through, got master's, PhDs, whatever. We are afraid of this technology. We use it every day, but I don't understand what my son is doing on his phone or his computer. I don't understand who's talking to him, who's whispering in his ear. I don't understand it. I don't get it. So I'm so busy working that I don't have time to figure it out. So I think that there's a whole another group of folks, and it's the parents to help them understand, people who are educated, to help them understand what's going on with their kids so that they can help them and advise them. And we're telling them something, but they're hearing something different 24/7 on the internet. But thank you, that was a great talk.
Welcome. Just a thought on that. There's a lot of really interesting stuff online. That one presentation I pointed out, Parenting in the Digital Age, kind of pointed out a lot of the things that parents can look at when you're raising your kid in the digital age. I think a lot about this with my son. How does my son perceive money when I'm using a credit card every day? Does money even mean anything to him? How do I teach him financial responsibility, fiscal responsibility when I'm using a credit card, and he can just swipe a credit card all the time? And that's what he's going to grow up with. So we've made an intentional decision to use money, to actually pay for things in cash when we're around our son. And I think a lot of the things, you can go online, you can read a lot of stuff, you can talk to people. I did all that to make this presentation, and then I realized it was good, but what's really the most important thing is just sit back and listen. Talk to your kids, understand their world, ask them about the world, ask them why they think the way they do, what are the assumptions that they're making. And from there, I think you can really uncover a lot of this for yourself as well. All right, thank you so much. I apologize if I can't take any more questions.